and welcome back to Dude, Where's My Ramp, the podcast about disability and mental health. Actors' needs are important to us, so let's begin with audio descriptions. Hi, I'm Chandy. I'm a white male with short brown hair on the sides, it's a little bit longer on top. I've got a ginger beard and I'm wearing a black top today. The background behind me is slightly blurred, but in the background you can also see some images hanging on the wall. Emma?
Hi, I'm Emma, and I am a white woman in her early 30s, and I am wearing a gray long sleeve shirt. I have long brown hair and glasses, and my background is blurred out, but you can see like lights, and that's about it.
Description's done. Let's get into our ramp check. This is where we check in with each other and or share news and updates before diving into the big stuff. No pressure, just a space to be honest, messy, or whatever we need. It's Emma. How have you been since the last episode?
I've been pretty good. I mean, life is a little stressful at the moment with stuff going on with in my personal life, but if it makes sense, like it's sort of like, yeah, lots of things are not okay, but I'm okay. I'm moving through not okay in an okay way.
I think like that vulnerability around like saying, yeah, I'm like not okay today, or it's been really tough. Like I think that sometimes just helps not to find those answers and stuff, but just allow yourself to be like, and sometimes it's so like, I think as humans, we're scared of just letting ourselves be in that state of mind. And I'm the worst for it. Like I'm always like trying to think of every scenario, every situation where I can make it better, I can fix it, I can have a solution. But I think sometimes better not to have a solution. I sound like I'm a therapist.
No, it's true. I think I do that too. Like, well, I'll tell you one thing that's going on right now is I have a friend that I'm really close with that we, like, over the past few months were like chatting most days, like texting most days. We were seeing each other like usually every week, and she sort of went silent. And I have been like, so I did something, oh my God, she hates me. Like I've been moving through it, like, I've been trying to sort of address, decatastrophize. I'm doing a lot of that and practicing that and figuring out like, okay, well, first of all, not all about you, Emma. People have their own lives and stuff going on. But like, yeah, I think I tend to sort of sit there and analyze until I can't do it anymore. And I'm trying to like sort of, it's okay to analyze, but like don't spend all day doing it.
I was talking to this about with my therapist like last week around like this rejection sensitivity dysphoria, because I think I'm so bad at it, and I didn't know what it was until I started to realize that it might be because I have ADHD and autism. And I think it's like this. So for anyone who's not aware, it's a term that's associated with ADHD, but not exclusive to it. And it's where you're emotionally triggered by the perception or misperception of rejection, criticism, or failure. And I think I'm probably the latter. Like I'm always a failure, or I've annoyed someone, or like people don't want to talk to me because they think I'm annoying. So I think like it's our natural state of mind, and it's not to say that it's wrong or it's right. It's just, and I think sometimes admitting that you just got to sit with it sometimes is so frustrating because you want to not feel that way, but at the same time, like you can't help who you are, and you shouldn't have to change.
Well, and I think what makes those situations hard too is like, especially when you have ADHD, so that's ADHD is autism and ADHD, and we both have it. And so we've spent our lifetime, having to pay close attention and analyze other people because we don't naturally pick up on the things that they are putting out. And, we sort of become experts in people because we study them. And so when there is a shift and we can't, figure it out, it's really dysregulating and destabilizing, because it's when there's an unknown, we're conditioned to think it's our fault because that's what, I mean, my whole life I've been pathologized by neurotypicals, whether it's teachers or people in my family or friends or other, so I've been taught that if somebody's energy or shifts, it's probably on me. But that's not the truth. And that's not true. That's just what we've been taught.
It's funny because I went to an event this week for neurodivergent business owners in the area where I am. And I wasn't going to go because I was like, I get really anxious around going to events and stuff, like especially networking. And then I went and I knew someone that was going, so that I kind of had like an anchor of someone who I can go to in an emergency. And then I got there, and as I'm talking, like we go around the circle, and we're just talking. And I tell you, that's the most freeing conversation I've had because there was no judgment. Everyone was just their authentic self. And turns out I knew two other people that were there. Like I'd met them in passing or I'd spoken to them in other times. And it just felt so like calming. Like, and people there were like, when you talk to someone, like you can kind of tell whether they're neurodivergent because you can see synchronicities and like things that you do as well. And I think that's why we get along, because I think we both understand each other a little bit better than.
Yeah. It's sort of like you have a radar for like-minded people.
But yeah, I think it's good though, like to have that comfort and have that, because it is emotionally draining to go through stuff, and
Yep.
especially when situations are kind of built a certain way, and so you're trying to navigate it, and everyone else seems to be navigating it a completely different way.
Yeah. And it's really it's hard to be in any situation where it's everybody in the room speaks Russian and you're speaking, Spanish. It feels like that sometimes. And it's it's like everybody got a memo beforehand, but it didn't get emailed to you. It's like that, like, wait, what?
It's almost
Like,
I'm reading the manual that's like, the little stick man in the IKEA catalog. I've been given that man that book to follow, and everyone else has been given like written instructions that they can follow easily.
Yep. I remember one time, this was like when I think I was like a sophomore in high school, and it was French class or whatever. And like, you get your textbooks. I got the wrong one. And so like it had a similar looking cover, but I like open up their books, and I see people like reading and reciting, and I was like, that's not what this says. I was freaking out, and it looked the same. But finally, like, the instructor came over, the teacher, and she was like, that's not what you're supposed to have. And I was like, well, what happened? But it was like at the end of class, so the entire time, because it's also French, and I was like, is this my brain? What's going on?
I think this kind of feeds into this episode's topic. So I don't know if you want to talk about kind of our main topic for today.
Yeah. So what was it? Oh yes. Okay. Sorry. I was going through our Instagram.
That's right.
Okay. So in an ableist society, disabled people's emotional responses to injustice, anger, grief, assertiveness, withdrawal, are often framed as evidence of mental instability or poor adjustment. And these are not seen as rational responses to oppression, but as proof that the disabled person is unwell. And this reflects a system that is invested in maintaining control by defining resistance as pathology.
And I think just from that alone, like, as people who are neurodivergent and who have autism and stuff, I think we have a strong sense of injustice and of like moral duty and moral responsibility. And so, like, for me, when I see injustice, I will stand up to it, even if I don't I'm not affected by it. Like, I guess, like, being trans or things like that. Like, I'm not trans myself, and so I'm not. But I can see when there's injustice and when I need to stand up for something, or like someone deserves to have a voice. And so I think when then people say, "Oh, but like you're just mentally unwell or something, or like you have a mental health problem, so what do you know?" and stuff, I think it devalues our experience as human beings and makes us, like, it assumes that we don't have the capacity to understand things and understand inequality and quite big topics, I guess you would label it as.
Yeah. So, what are some examples where your emotional response to injustice was used to discredit you? Do you have any that you can think of?
Uh, Not that I can. I'm gonna ask ChatGPT to give me some, and then I'll think off the top of my head of.
Or I can redo it. I can also ask the question, why do you think that some people are so uncomfortable with disabled people's anger or pain or assertiveness? Is that easier?
Yeah, I think people are afraid of that because I think I think it's that default setting, that ableist setting of like, this person has a mental health problem or a learning disability, and so or just they're even disabled, and somehow every disability impacts our cognition, our reasoning, our thought process, everything. When it doesn't, like, we still have thoughts and feelings, and we can see stuff like injustice or inequality, and we can feel so emotionally attached to it because we have experienced it ourselves, and so we want to make sure, like, I want to make sure that it doesn't happen to someone else. Like, when I see, I guess one example would be like, my dad used to use words to make me discredit me and make me feel like I wasn't good enough. And so when I see other children being treated the same way by teachers, or someone says something about a young person and their inability to do something in their eyes, I'm like, well, actually, have you thought about all this? And I think when you asked for an example, I was like, I can't think of one, but just thinking, looking back at the last couple of years, I challenged our local, like, police and crime commissioner, so that they're like in charge of the police budget for our area, because I experienced a hate crime, and it got a bit of media attention, and then he started to want to get involved and speak to me, obviously because it impacts on his public image. And we were talking, and I was like, yeah, but disabled people have a voice, and like, if you got them up on stage, and he was talking about one woman that he'd worked with where he said, oh no, but she couldn't get up on stage and deliver a talk. And I was like, how do you know? And he's like, I just know that she wouldn't be able to. And I was like, you're making an assumption. Like, there's ways around it. Like, you could interview her, have her voice, show it on screen. No, it's not her being on stage directly, but it's adjusting it and giving that platform for her to share her voice, and she's still up on stage. In essence, if you think about it, it's just not physical appearance; it's through video or audio, and that's still like giving her a platform to share her experiences. but he really dismissed it and said, no, that wouldn't happen, that couldn't happen. And that kind of moved on, like the topic kind of moved on to the next thing. But I was just thinking, like, anything that I try and say or challenge you on, you're not going to want to listen to, because you just have a preconceived idea of what disability is and our understanding of the world.
Right. And I think, so you were talking to somebody who's an authority figure. And I think also I've noticed with authority figures, this is a big theme of a negative response or resistance to disabled people, whether they are young or whether they're adults. It seems that there seems to be a real discomfort with any sort of challenge to what's either being said or done. I as I remember all throughout school, I've always been very assertive, outspoken, and teachers would resist every single time they were, to them, I was being disrespectful, and sometimes I was. I had a tendency to maybe communicate in a way that was not always appropriate. But I had a little bit of a language problem. Like swearing. So I would maybe, but for the most part, I was simply being assertive, and I was, telling people what I needed. And it was seen as I was challenging their authority or telling them what to do. And it was kindergarten through 12th grade. It was every year there was an issue with teachers. My dad was constantly coming into like the school for meetings. I there's like a quote that I will always remember from my dad. It was my math teacher in middle school, and I had I don't know what I was doing with ripped paper. Maybe I was ripping it up, but it spilled on the floor and I couldn't pick it up. And she was telling me to pick it up and I physically couldn't. And she's like, all right, you have detention. And my dad went in the next morning, and he gets really he's not a lawyer, but he should have been. Like, honestly, he's a little scary. But he went in and he was like, no, 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 there will be no detention. And I just remember hearing that. No, I didn't hear it. A classmate of mine did and told me, and I was like, oh my gosh. But no, it was me resisting that was being disrespectful to her. It was, I'm not going to do what you say, when I was really I physically can't do it. So that was an issue all through my years in school. At work, I've been let go from jobs because managers or a boss, they think I'm challenging their authority.
And I'm sorry, Karen.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, the reason that I think these responses to kind of injustice and stuff are so weaponized is because they create discomfort with people who are invested in like ableist norms. Like, our discomfort threatens the smooth operation of kind of systems, and challenging this kind of, the more we resist, the more the system tries to contain people, and kind of paint them as irrational, unstable, or broken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's disabled people. So non-disabled individuals have historically been able to place themselves in positions of authority over disabled people. Disabled people are uh, they're constantly patronized. There's controlled, surveilled. behavior is watched and measured and interpreted through an ableist lens, and we're expected to manage well and regulate our emotions and behave in ways that comfort non-disabled people. And when we don't, we're punished socially, emotionally, and sometimes even medically. And this is a form of behavioral containment, and it functions sort of like an invisible leash. So not a physical restraint, like but a social and psychological correction through consequences like exclusion and infantilization and institutional intervention. And I think, you know, I'm trying to think of, oh, right, I was going to use a personal example. Here we go. So I definitely was a child that, you know, I was labeled as a kid who had behavior issues. And like, yes, I lashed out a lot, and I did definitely demonstrate emotional dysregulation. And but it was a response to ableism. And but therapists, teachers, and school psychologists labeled it as me being mentally unwell. And so throughout my childhood, I was placed on a multiple different, you know, medications that were meant for completely different uh, circumstances. So I was put on like Depakote, which is a very heavy psychiatric medicine that's meant for, I think it's meant for, actually, let me just like Google it. Yeah, okay. It's meant for seizure disorders and bipolar disorder. So, and I was put on mood stabilizers. I was put on SSRIs. I was put on uh, um, all different kinds of psychiatric meds to fix me, to get me to be, when really all I needed was somebody who understood what I was facing, what I was dealing with. As a child, you know, the word ableism was not in my vocabulary. I didn't have the tools to communicate what I was experiencing. I needed adults to step in and um, help me move through those experiences and learn how to respond to them in a healthy way, and learn how to identify when I'm being treated unfairly, and what to do, and give me resources. And I never got any of that. I was medicated, and at 8 years old, I was even placed in a psychiatric hospital for a week, which was very frightening. These were like I had like been suspended from school for saying a bad word, and I was in this facility with kids who like were very we're really struggling in ways that, like, quite frankly, I shouldn't have been exposed to. Um, you know, as an 8-year-old little girl, and my roommate was somebody who like tried to stab her mother, and that was like very serious. And I not that I'm not trying to insult that individual. It's just you know, I wasn't an appropriate candidate for that facility, and it was traumatic because I wasn't really ready to be exposed to those to that type of circumstance yet, you know.
And before we started recording this, I think we were both chatting about the idea of what we as disabled people understand around the world, and like the kind of non-disabled script of the world, or like the understanding of what things are and stuff. And we kind of touched upon this earlier around like having that manual to go into the world and stuff. And I think a good example of kind of when people have stood up and wanted to change the system and stuff. Like in Spain, they elected their first parliamentarian with Down syndrome, and the amount of comments that I saw on the post when this came out was like, they have Down syndrome. How are they going to be responsible for, like, how they're going to make decisions and stuff that are actually going to do good and stuff? And I'm just like, they probably have more of an understanding of
Trump's
inequality.
president, so I guess anything's possible.
I think like there's just an assumption around like when someone's disabled, they don't know, understand kind of injustice and inequality and these big topics that I think a lot of people don't understand really. And I think not that we're experts in them, but I think most disabled people do spend their life being exposed to these issues firsthand, whether that be through hate crimes or through discrimination or ableist comments. Just having to deal with that daily, they do have an understanding of things.
I would say, particularly people everybody I've met with Down syndrome understand they need more credit. I'm sorry. Like they get it. They really see everything and they understand everything. I swear. Like all of my peers that I grew up with Down syndrome, like I like they would always be people would underestimate every single time and they would just like fuck with them. It's really funny. Oh my god, I miss that. But no, it's I think so. And you know what? In those situations where it's like, how are you gonna do this? How are we gonna do this? What's like? Well, maybe somebody's not experienced, but like sometimes you just gotta. Sometimes there isn't a protocol, and you figure it out. I saw on Instagram, I've been following this individual who's a med student and they are a wheelchair user, and they drive a power wheelchair like what I drive, and they're trying to be a surgeon, and like so they're like there is no protocol for like scrubbing in a power wheelchair, and that was created. It was like it's I love that content. It's so cool. We need disabled people in medicine. I'm so excited. But yeah, you figured out. So this was it parliament. What do you call it? Parliamentarian.
Yeah, parliamentarian in Spain.
Parliamentarian. Um, uh, with Down syndrome. Okay, maybe there's going to be some new, things to figure out, but figure it out. Fucking figure it out. Isn't that what Parliament's for? Figuring shit out? Isn't that what you're all there to do? Like, why are you intimidated by that?
And I'm not being funny, but there are people in Parliament in the UK that don't understand the system or make out that they do, but they don't, and they act like they're all high and mighty. And I think someone who actually wants to deliver change will do everything they can. They'll learn, they'll adapt, non-disabled or disabled, and they'll do their best to work out a system that works and that actually benefits us all.
Yeah, in politics, that's not their goal. I find now I don't know. I'm an American, so maybe it's just kind of because I live in this country. Emphasis on the country. Oh, wait, no, I shouldn't say that. I'm sorry. No, cut that out. But I am like, in my opinion, the country I was raised in, politicians, they're not here to make the world better. They're here to get power and votes, and that's it. It's not you want to do good in the world, like those are the people who are like Honestly, it's preschool teachers. They're the good in the world. I don't know how they're. I did that for a little bit, and wow, yeah, that takes a lot of patience. That takes all the patience. I have never been more exhausted or having to like, oh my God, yeah, that was really hard. Children are, whew, yeah.
And I think when disabled people do choose to respond to ableism and challenge things, like you said earlier, I think
Mhm.
our reactions to these injustices and stuff are often misread and deliberately twisted. I think if we express that we're angry at injustice or anything, it's seen as aggressive or dangerous. And I think, like you said, like we're labeled as difficult and stuff, but this impacts on our mental health severely because I think it takes its toll. And when we're told that over and over that our views are not legitimate or our responses are actually causing harm, it can actually be a sign that like leads to self-doubt, internalized ableism, like we've talked about in previous episodes, and we start to question ourselves a lot more. Like, am I overreacting? And I think, and I can give an example of this. When I had therapy a few weeks ago, I was talking about my dad's comments and stuff and how things were impacting me, and I think I was like, I don't know if this is just me overreacting or like is this me just like saying stuff because this is what, am I making something out of nothing? I said to her, and she was like, and then I was like, yeah, but the way I feel, and like I became all teary and like emotional and stuff, and I was like, I wouldn't be crying if I wasn't feeling like if it wasn't real. And she kind of just agreed with me, and I was like, so it puts that seed of self doubt that could lead to like depression, anxiety, and trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think I think that what I have learned, I've experienced the same struggle. I still do. But what I have been leaning into, what really helps, what I think I within society, all of us, not just disabled people, everybody, I don't know where this came from, but we're conditioned not to listen to our gut or our instinct or um to question the signals that our body gives us. And it's actually the most accurate
Mm.
uh, uh, system that we have, honestly. And I've come to lean on, um, for example, I know that the way I feel when I am being held accountable for something and it's justified, or when I'm being a behavior is being pointed out as inappropriate, or if when I'm being held accountable or called out and it makes sense, I I feel one way that I have that feeling of like embarrassment and cringe, and I want to sort of hide. That's the feeling I get in those moments.
Mm.
That is not the same feeling I get when I'm facing ableism. They're two
Mm.
very different feelings. The way that my body responds to ableism and the way that my body responds to being held accountable or called out or corrected in any way, totally different feelings in my body. And so I trust that. When I'm facing ableism, I feel sort of a pit in my stomach. I feel my heart starts to race. I feel anxious. I feel misjudged. Um, um, I feel angry, or I feel unseen. I feel the need to explain. I That is not the same as that. So I've taught myself to lean into that and
Mm.
trust that, because they're different things in the body.
And I think there's an overlap with ableism and this thing called sanism. I think I've said that right, which is kind of a form of discrimination and oppression directed at individuals with kind of actual or perceived like mental health disorders or cognitive impairments.
Okay.
And this kind of there's often like the distress disabled people feel in response to oppression, and it's framed as a psychiatric issue instead of a rational reaction to kind of harm or danger. And disabled people, especially those with cognitive disabilities or impairments or chronic illness or kind of mental health diagnosis, are pushed into kind of psychiatric labels and interventions that are kind of less about support and more about control. The message is clear as that if we resist, if we disrupt, we're just wrong. We're not just wrong, we're sick.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned that with the way I was medicated and placed into a facility for a week. That was uh, in just over the in recent times. Back in October, my mother was hospitalized and diagnosed with ALS, and I had a very calm and healthy response to, obviously it was a life-changing diagnosis, and there was processing that had to be done. But I was really the one who was handling it the best. I knew what I needed, and I met my needs. I was staying emotionally regulated, but my family and my mom's friends who were there, my mom's husband, um, responded in a way that was ableist and offensive, and I knew would be not just negatively impact my mom, was harmful to her. And I was very careful not to push too hard, because even though I had every right to, I knew that that would be met with consequences. And so I was very careful, and even being very careful, trying and really being intentional to hold space for people who they were being ableist, like I was being very kind. And I was the conversations behind my back were that I was unstable, that I needed help, that I was being manic, and that I was spiraling. And they, certain relatives of mine and a couple of my mom's friends were trying to get my father, who lives, in Wisconsin, to fly out to handle me. Um, I'm I was 31 at the time. I'm 32 now. I'm a woman in my 30s. I don't, and it was all for the non-disabled comfort. It was and this was my mom who just received this diagnosis. Even if I was being messy and what all the things they were saying that were true, it's still wrong. It's still wrong, because I, am the concern was all about my siblings, and that I was being too much for them, and that they need to have they need to be free from worry. What about me? Am I don't I get to be free from worry? And I never asked anything of them. I took breaks, and I was doing things on my own, and I was taking care of myself, and I still got punished. But it was about control. It was the fact that I was planting seeds of, you know, things that they did not want to, um, they didn't want to face, or, um, I was, and they, whether it was beliefs or actions, they wanted to do things their ableist way. And even just the idea of something different felt like a threat. And so they weaponized my disability, and, you know, it really, that those 2 weeks where I was there, in New Haven, and being with my mom at the hospital and all that, I felt so crazy. I felt so gas. The way people were being to me, to my face and behind my back, were completely different. I felt lied to. I didn't know who to trust. And it really messed with my head, and it took a long time for me, months to really put the pieces together and figure out what happened. It had long-term effects, and I do know the situation. I'm clear on that now, but now I'm dealing with grief of betrayal, of being treated like that. I feel very, that is, so there's the having to undo all of the psychological abuse and the impacts of that, and then grief. And it's all this time, it's distracting me from being able to be there for my mom. It's really cruel. It's very cruel.
It is painful, and it is kind of, it's hard, like when we feel like our voice is being kind of dismissed and stuff. And I think in terms of where we need to go from here as a society, we need to create spaces where disabled people's kind of discomfort, anger, grief is honored and valid in response to injustice. Because I think a lot of the time, like, it's kind of dismissed, like, we know what's best, let us deal with it, let us, like, non-disabled people are kind of like, they think they can go, like, I think because they think the world is not set up for disabled people, and they kind of acknowledge that they know how to work the system and stuff, where if we actually stood up to these injustice and the things that are wrong, we can fix it. And I think we need mental health frameworks that see systemic trauma for what it is, and don't stop kind of pathologize. I can't say the word.
Pathologizing.
That's the one.
Yeah.
The kind of pathologizing the people harmed by ableism, and we need to stop kind of and demand that disabled people wait. And we need to stop demanding that disabled people kind of stay quiet, polite, or passive in the face of oppression.
Mm-hmm. I think, and I think like I think what people I mean, what I like to ask is, what does it cost to tell the truth in whatever situation you're in? So
Mm.
at work or at school, in your family, in your friend group, um, and what gets rewarded and why, and how can we start honoring the disruptors in our community instead of silencing them? And I think what we need to do, well, I think it's important that disabled people, even though there might be like, I have always felt like, from my experience in childhood, um, I feel that it's the cost of me being silent. It feels sort of like being slowly suffocated. And so it's costing me like oxygen, honestly. Um, and that is the most important thing, because we need that to live. Um, and I think we start honoring the disruptors by also being there for other marginalized groups too, because I mean, disabled people aren't the only people that are pathologized. And I mean, you have, the trope of the angry Black woman, for example. And I think maybe if it doesn't feel safe for a disabled individual to stick up for themselves, stick up for somebody else,
Mm.
create an ally. I think, building bridges is a really, sometimes it's a, because safety is important. And sometimes we can't address our own marginalization, because it feels very unsafe, or it is unsafe. So build a bridge, because and I think that kind of creates a solution for you, because now when you do feel there, that creates safety for you, because now you have somebody to stand with you.
100% agree.
I feel like I've seen that happen. I did that a lot as a kid. I felt, I don't know, I just kind of like, I saw somebody being mistreated. I clocked it, and I always wanted to like stand with them. And I don't know why I keep thinking of this classmate of mine. His name was Billy, and he went to my elementary school, and he was not disabled. He just was adopted. And he was adopted by like a single father. In the small town I was living in Connecticut, and he had some behavior stuff because he had, he had been through some trauma. He wasn't a baby being adopted. He was a kid in elementary school. You have, memories and stuff at that point, and have moved through the world. Anyways, so he was always just painted as this like problem kid, and like, just, wrong side of the tracks kind of. And I just butted up to, I was like, we're buds. Like, I don't know. I liked him. I thought he was funny. And yeah, he was a little edgy. So was I. And I built that bridge, and we stuck up with each other. And I remember like he would stick up for me too. And we did not have the same, we were not marginalized in the same way. We were both punished by being put in the special education room, as is regular routine in the public school system in the United States. But yeah, it was nice. And there was solidarity there. And I think I don't know, I can't speak for Billy, but I learned a lot, and I really appreciated that friendship. He was fun. He was a funny kid. Wonder what happened to him. If you're out there, Billy, like, you were awesome. So to wrap up the episode, I would like for the audience to ask themselves these questions either today or this week, or as you reflect. What are some examples where your emotional response to injustice was used to discredit you? Or was there a time you can think of where you responded to a disabled person by pathologizing them or dismissing them as being unstable or dysregulated? And have you ever witnessed or experienced a moment where silence was mistaken for peace? And then the last question is, what's a way you can communicate or express yourself that others have misunderstood or pathologized, and how can we reframe disabled emotional expression as meaningful rather than disordered?
And that's a wrap on this episode of Dude, Where's My Ramp? Thanks so much for spending this time with us. If anything we've discussed has triggered any difficult emotions, memories, or mental health struggles, please know that you're not alone. We've included a list of support resources in the show notes with trusted organizations in both the UK and US who are here to listen, help, and guide you. You can find us on social media. These will be in the show notes below. Feel free to send us a DM if you want to get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review. Also, don't forget to share this episode. The more we spread the word, the louder our collective voice becomes. Tune into a new episode every Monday. More stories, more laughs, and yeah, probably more rants about ramps and mental health and the life of disability. Until next time, take care of yourself, your ramps, and each other. Remember, we're all in this together.
The Wildcats.